Transpired from there is a tale that attained mythic status over the years, and today we get to hear all about it straight from the guy responsible for transitioning the world of photography from analog to digital. Mr. Steve Sasson, welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast.
As promised in my last video, we are covering Dehancer, the plugin for Final Cut, Resolve, Premiere, Photoshop, Lightroom that allows you to create a bit of a film vibe to your footage or stills. I used footage and Resolve and Dehancer as a means of color grading my still imagery. I know, it's all kinds of backward. But the cool thing about this is that Resolve is free, and you can actually take any DNG file and grade that in Resolve as well. So even if you were just to do a strictly photography-based project, say you had Nikon files that their raw files are not DNG, you can convert those online for free, get a DNG file, and entirely photo edit within Resolve in a very, very refined fashion for free. Dehancer, the plugin for color grading, they reached out to me, they offered me their product to review. I'm gonna take you through my workflow and basically how I approached grading. All of this was brand new to me. I do not claim to be an expert in any way, shape, or form. I'm just gonna show you what works for me, what I thought of the software at the end, and whether you should get it. So the first thing we're gonna do is jump into Resolve. If you are brand new to this platform, as I was 2 weeks ago, it can seem really daunting and overwhelming, but I promise you it's actually very straightforward, very easy. So let's just jump in there. If you are familiar with Resolve, just go down in the chapter markers below to jump right into Dehancer if you like. So for beginners, we are just going to start a new project, call it Stills, and jump right in. You will see there's no clips in this media pool. That's the first thing we're gonna do is import some media. I'm gonna import way more than we need, but this is all just grouped together in one folder. And then everything, it doesn't matter the frame rate for this because we're working on stills. You're gonna see everything show up here, okay? And you can change your views of this, of course. We're gonna just come down to this and drag it right on into our timeline. If I'm actually just editing, I like to edit in this third tab. People coming from Premiere or Final Cut apparently like using the Cut tab. I happen to really like this tab, the third. And then I'm just gonna find a frame that I want to work as like a keyframe to work color through. It will affect the entire clip, but it's just about finding a point in your edit that's a good representation of everything that you want to see for your color grade. And then we're gonna jump to this fifth clip here. Now what's different about Dehancer than other platforms, NLEs, is this node sort of concept. Think of nodes almost a little bit like, they're almost like adjustment layers. And so the way that you sequence them does affect how it shows up, and it is different. So there are a couple of ways to use Dehancer in this node structure. The easiest and most straightforward, if you just want to jump in and do everything in a single node, which is certainly possible. It's not, I would say, the best workflow, but certainly possible. And what you'll see here is I've actually starred these two things. These are the two that I use the most, but if you come up here, you can show all. You have a lot of effects in the color tab. This is where, you know, DaVinci Resolve started, was a telecine kind of tool or a coloring tool. And the first thing to do if you want to just jump right in, which I do recommend to start, is just throw Dehancer right onto your first node and work entirely in Dehancer just to play with the tool and get to know it. So this is the most straightforward to, or most direct path to an output. You can select your source here. I am shooting in Vlog, so I'm gonna go to my camera. I'm gonna select Panasonic. I'm gonna select the S5 II, which is the camera I'm working in, and Vlog. It does say Vlog L, which is interesting. I haven't spoken to Dehancer about this. There are technically two types of V-Log, V-Log L and V-Log Full. S5 II uses V-Log Full. The G9 that I love is V-Log L. So I actually don't typically use this method, but you could. I like to do the secondary method, which is slightly more complex, and we'll get into that next. But this will give you a good starting point to play with the plugin. One of my criticisms of the plugin is that it just immediately throws on a film profile as well as film grain. That is not actually how I like to work. So I take off the film grain first and foremost, and I take off the film profile. What I like to do actually first is work through my print. I love this print window almost more than the film emulations themselves because they have a lot of really nice qualities. And it depends on the clip. I play with this, I experiment with it. You never know until you try something. And I like to go right into Endura glossy paper if I want kind of a more modern look. And I will oftentimes just play with my exposure and tonal contrast within this component of Dehancer. My color density, you can pull this down, the saturation you can pull down, and then I will refine up at the top with my exposure compensation, my temperature control, etc. Okay? Now, again, this is what I have found works for me. There's no right answers here. It's just a question of what works for you. It does have defringe enabled, so if you're using like a vintage lens that's giving you like high level of chromatic aberrations, you can enable this. I'm using a modern lens here. It doesn't have any issues, so I'm just gonna disable it. The more things you enable within this platform or plugin, the more it will slow your computer down. So you just kind of wanna work minimally, and in particular, if you're gonna use grain, save it for the very end. Look at it, test it, make sure you got the look that you like. Like I could right now just come in here and say film enabled, or sorry, film grain enable. And that way I can sort of see what it's looking like and I can say, yeah, I like that. But then I'm gonna save the application of it for the very end. Just don't edit with film grain on, it just kills your computer. If you want a more intense film look, you can go into the print films here and it gets a little bit more contrasty. I love these looks as well. Kodak 2383 is my favorite, but like actually the Fujifilm is looking pretty fire here. I think I prefer it to the Kodak. Kodak's gonna be a little warmer. Fuji's gonna be on the more greens, the more like traditional Fujifilm look. What I like here is I'll actually take that tonal contrast, knock it back a little bit. Right about there. And then you can play with your target whites, like how extreme the white is. I like to pull the whites back a little bit here, clean it up. And then I like to go into compression. And typically with all of these tools, just like any color grading tool, you're always gonna go back and forth, right? So you make an adjustment, you go to another node, you make another adjustment, you work that way, back and forth. The impact of the compression you can see is like, this is no compression, and this is compression. And what it's doing is just bringing your highs and lows, kind of flattening them out a little bit. It's a little bit more of a filmic roll off. And then you can affect your white point here as well, right? So this is totally minimal impact on your whites. And then you can, if you're looking right here, you can kind of see it right in here. So this is looking nice already. I'll pull that back a little bit because it can start to look a little artificial. And then if you need to do a little bit more refinement on your contrast, you can mess with your black levels here. I use this to some degree, but not a lot, to be honest. I like to just mostly do my adjustments in print and then any fine tuning up here in the input area. And then if I wanted to add a film look to this, I can enable this. This is going to change everything, as you can see. And there are so many film profiles. You should download this and do a trial version and just play with all of them because there are just too many to cover here. But I will cover a couple that I really like to use. One of my favorites is a film I had never even heard of before playing with this platform. Astrum Color Negative 125. I love this one. It's just a little more natural. You can sort of see what it's doing here. It's pulling back some of the saturation. So now if I'm going to use a film, I'm probably going to reset all of my print and use the film as the premise for my base grade, and then add the print element just at the end to give it a little bit more punch. So then you can see with this, you can push and pull it. What I'm gonna do now is go into the film developer and try a few things. So we're gonna boost, so that's another note. I do this a lot. You have to enable the thing for it to work. And so sometimes you'll be moving a slider around and like, why isn't this working? It's because it's not enabled. So we're gonna boost the contrast here. We're gonna work with the gamma correction a little bit, brighten it up. I love color boost in here. I mean, it's too extreme here, obviously, but color boost is really nice in film developer typically. And in film compression, the color density is also a really nice tool. So this just makes it a little thicker, a little richer. Let's play with our white points here. And I am seeing, oh yeah, so that's just putting everything together. I am seeing a little bit of what I would consider like a little too much magenta. It's almost magenta in the skin. So let's see where I would go here. I would probably just correct the tint a slight bit towards the green. And I think I like that a bit more. It can go too far. And then this is where I might come to the print. So now the print, I'm gonna go just to the Endura glossy paper. It just adds some punch, but it's too much, right? So we're gonna bring that tonal contrast back a little bit. And then I'm gonna probably raise the exposure just a little bit more, color density right around there. I never really touch the saturation. I like it where it is. I'm a punchy kind of, a fan of the punch, 94.5. So this to me is starting to look really nice. I like this look. And now I'm just for a visual eye match going to enable the film grain and see what I like. Now, this is cool if you want to go heavy and hard. Note that if you're uploading to YouTube though, it does not play, the compression on YouTube, it does not play well with film grain. So I actually don't recommend it for YouTube unless you have a very, very high bitrate output. I really like the 65 millimeter ISO 50. It's a very, very subtle grain, but just a little bit. And then the 250 is probably my happy place. So there's just like a little bit of grain in there when you play it out. It moves. And then there's all kinds of features that you can add to this grain that give it that film look. You can add some halation. So if we add the, or enable the halation, you can start to see this area. This is not ideal, but let's zoom in over here to 75 and whoops. See if you can look at this area. There's probably not enough of a specular highlight to really see it. Yes, see when you mask, you can see that it's not affecting anything. So it doesn't really work in this particular scenario, but you can enable the bloom. And the bloom essentially is your digital pro mist filter, if you will. And you can kind of see all of the edges here just begin to soften. So see how much softer that looks, like it's got that pro mist look, whereas if I disable it, it's much sharper. And then you can add things like film damage. This gives you a jitter on playback. This gives you film breath, where it has a little bit of an inconsistency to the way the film spools. And then gate weave is a very similar thing. So I'll just play this for you. I don't personally ever use gate weave, film breath, or film damage. It's just a step too far for me, but just to play it out for you so you can see kind of how that looks. It's actually kind of hard to see, but you'll see like little bits of dust specks come through. You'll see, you know, you can, I don't know if you can see that very well, but there is some film damage playing through there. And you know, it gives a fun effect. If I were to do like a very specific nostalgic sequence, that's maybe where I'd use it. But for average everyday looks and feels, I don't think I would use this. Now, this is what I would say is a good baseline for a standard piece of footage. But because we went over the top with this stylized shoot, we're going to take this even farther. So we are going to add 35 millimeter film grain at 500. So really, really punchy grain. I'm not going to play with the amount. It's fine at default, but you can start to see that grain structure really show up here. Let's find another hero frame. Okay, so that's looking good. And now I'm going to go into the print and start punching up that contrast even more. And it is also, with contrast comes saturation, so I might pull that back a little bit. I'm going to pull up the EV a tiny bit. And I think I will go up here to the film developer and color boost it a little bit from here. It's just a different kind of color boost, and then the film compression, the density of the color as well. All right, so now we're starting to see a little bit more of that drama. Open up that tonal range a slight bit. And like I said, this is just a lot of going back and forth. Bring up the gamma. And then at the very top, just a slight punch to the exposure, temperature. I like on the warm side. And that's more or less it. You can, again, just change your film and get a new look. So Cinestill, that's going to look very different, but you just take the colors into a slightly different space. Natura 16, love Natura 1600. So that just gives you something to play with. And then obviously as you're working through these things, you can start to refine. And once you build multiple clips, so let's actually go back to our timeline and add another clip. It will be entirely different, right? Because this is a completely different color balance. And actually with this, I remember that I just used the print because the print just itself was so awesome. So let's go into the color tab. We're going to throw Dehancer on here and do this very quickly. So choose camera, Panasonic, S5 II, Vlog. All right. Then we're going to disable the film, disable the grain, and go right for the print. And I'm going to try this 2383. Love that print film. I'm going to save my exposure comp for the print area and kind of work in here. I'm going to push the color density all the way. I love pushing that color density all the way in here. And I'm going to turn on some film compression to bring the impact of this down. There we go. And push that color density there again, and just some minor refinements up here. I think I actually went even more contrasty for this shot. Oh, see? I'm like, why isn't it moving? Because it's not enabled. So be sure to enable this. All right, so now I can see how this is starting to come together. That's like how easy that was, and I really like this. This is where I might go back, add that film grain. I'm gonna push it to 500 ISO, and now it's starting to look very vibey. With this shot in particular, I also want a bit of I don't think the halation is gonna do much for us here, but I'll put it on. I don't think I want the bloom on here. I'll put it on, why not? I do want a vignette. And the vignette tool in here is actually really nice. I prefer it to the actual DaVinci Resolve vignette tool. So I'm just gonna add that vignette. As you can see, it's just bringing the attention back to the center of the frame where I want that sort of backlight or rim light to be highlighted. And let me think if there's anything else I would do here. The Target White in print film does from the right, it cleans it up. To the left, it makes it warmer. For this, I kind of want it on the cleaner side. And then I'm going to just bump that exposure a teeny bit again. And then I think we're pretty much there. You can see how slow it plays back when you are adding this grain in particular and the halation. You do see that halation right here though. It's lovely. It's a nice, you can affect how much of it you want, but at default, I think it's actually pretty good. And now I have two clips and I want to see how they are working together. So I can go up to Lightbox here and I can start to see how everything is coming together. This is something that can't be ignored. Dehancer definitely slows everything down and it makes exporting much, much slower. So oftentimes what I will do if I'm editing and ideally you do your edit first and you color as your very, very final step, but sometimes I am too impatient and I want to see what it's going to look like. So let's say I'm here and I'm seeing this and then I'm like, okay, it's looking good for color. I'll come back and refine it later. You can just click the number here to deactivate it. And if I were to do that, if I were to do that on both clips, you are going to see how much faster everything plays back. Now we're playing back at normal speed. It's Dehancer that slows it down. It's obviously a very robust plugin and it requires a bunch of power. Now, if I really wanted to tweak it and get into like a hue, saturation, luminance area, this is where I'm going to go to the more complex model of building my nodes to really refine Dehancer and make it more effective and more customized. Go back to our timeline. This one. Okay, so going back to our color tab. We're going to select these clips. Now for these, we're going to build a series of nodes. So the way you do that is you click on your node, you do Option S on a Mac. Sorry, I don't know on a Windows device. And I do about 7 nodes. Now this is my method and absolutely am not a pro. So take this for what it's worth. Look into your own color space transforms and your own workflows and node trees. I'm not using parallel nodes, which is more effective if you're getting really refined because of course every node builds on the other and then that sequence of events does affect how everything comes together. But to begin with, I do in node 1 a CST, so I'm going to color space transform. Then I do a second node, which is my exposure. Then I do a third node, which is my white balance. Then I go to contrast. Then I go to saturation. Then I go to color space transform. Then I go to Dehancer. And then I end with a final color space transform. Okay, so this is my node. You don't have to rebuild this every time. You can save this. I'll put a link into how you do that below. But basically this is my node tree that I just repeat and then I save my color space transform so I don't even have to worry about that and doing it every time. It gets a little tedious. So with my color space transform, I'm going to go up here into my effects tab and I'm going to grab color space transform. I use this so much that what I like to do is just, for example here, I like to put a little star here so that when I go to my favorites, all that shows up is color space transform and Dehancer. All right, so color space transform, we are going to transform this color space from Panasonic V-Log, which is from my camera. Panasonic input gamma is V-Log. And then output color space is going to be DaVinci Wide Gamut in intermediate. Okay. Then we're going to have our color space transform here. We're going the opposite. So we have DaVinci Wide Gamut, which is what we've transformed our Panasonic footage into up until this point. So we're going to go DaVinci Wide Gamut, Intermediate, DaVinci Intermediate, to Rec 709, which is what Dehancer is going to recognize as the input. Rec 709, okay? And then in Dehancer, we're going to add Dehancer to this node. Rec 709 is our source. And now we are set up and ready to go, okay? I'm going to disable the film because I know that looks wacky, and disable the film grain. And this is what we're working with. So we can immediately now see our white balance is off, right? So we're going to come into our white balance node, and this is going to affect everything between our two CSTs so that when it is fed into DaVinci Resolve, fed into Dehancer, it is built in the proper way for it to interpret all the information and affect only a film layer rather than going in and messing with all these other things. So in white balance, I'm going to come to this color wheel, and I'm just going to add a little bit of magenta in here to balance it out, and just play with this a little bit. Oh, come on. All right, so this is looking a little bit more balanced to me. It's maybe a little bit too, there we go. Okay, so that looks relatively accurate for white balance. Everything else is looking fine though. The exposure is like not crazy. I'm gonna just maybe brighten it a little bit through my offset. There are so many ways to do exposure, white balance, all these things. That's more complex than I'm gonna cover here. Then I'm gonna go into Dehancer, and this is now when I can start to play. But first I wanna find that keyframe. All right, so we're gonna just play with this image and start from here. So going to the print, Endura glossy paper. You're not going to see anything right away until I start messing with it. So tonal contrast, color density. I actually want to go right into 2383. This is a more heavy print film look. This definitely needs a little bit of work, right? So the target white we're going to bring into a warmer spot. I want to reduce the contrast. I'm going to definitely go into film expand just to bring the highlights down on my face. Bring the white point down, up, but it's like crushing all the whites down a little bit. Bring the impact up and bring the color density there. And then in our print, I'm going to bring this EV down a little bit. So you could do it here. Technically, you really should do it here. So I'm going to reset this offset and bring it down here. And again, there's so many different ways I could do it here, exposure here. I could just do the highlights here. So that's a different tutorial for a different time. But going here to the contrast, I think I want to lower the contrast a little bit. And then go back to my exposure, and I'm going to reduce my mids a little bit, like probably to 20, and bring my HDR global down, bring this down. Okay, so now I think we're in a really good spot to finalize our Dehancer look. Try adding some of that grain in, and there's nothing to halate here, but maybe a little bit of bloom. I think that's looking good. I like to sort of sit with it. I mean, this is a little bit too hot, I think. I'm gonna bring this down a little bit here. Oh, see, that's where you just get into bad habits. I'm gonna go back to my exposure and pull back from there. Okay, so that's looking pretty good to me. I'd be happy with that. We'll do one more round of that just so you can see it. Let's say this shot is close enough to this shot that we just want to say, let's take a shortcut and refine from there. I can be on this and then go to control, hold control with my keyboard mouse, click on the final grade that I'm liking and just apply grade, and it's going to apply it to the clip in question. Now it's not going to work here because obviously it's very different, and we're, even this would be nutso, right? But ooh, I kind of like that actually. I didn't do anything else here, so Dehancer, I could reset everything here, and already I'm starting to see that, but I kind of dig this, but that's like a horror film. Let me see. Maybe we should go for, a black and white one here. Now, the interesting thing with the black and white are they do all have a tint, which I don't particularly love. So when I was using any of the black and whites, hold on, I can't find it right now. Like Neopan. Even Neopan has a tint, which I don't love. So in this, I would just, go up to Film Developer and pull all of the color out, and print saturation out, and then work with that. We're going to go into our print film. Again, this is my favorite panel to work in. So tonal contrast, going to pump that. Going to go to my film grain, go up a little bit, go heavy on it. It is fun to also use these like 8mm film grains. I mean, you're really feeling it here. Student film time. And gamma correction, there's really enable. Love that. Okay, so that to me would be like a really cool art house vibe. And that's it. I mean, it can be so straightforward, work in one node, Dehancer, and that's it. Or get more complex, have more control with all these nodes ahead of it before you then do your final CST, which I didn't explain. This is just a weird thing I was experiencing where I would recognize my footage when output from Resolve would never look right on my phone or my computer. It would look flatter than I see here. And I have not seen anyone recommend this, but I tried it. It worked for me. It is probably wrong, but it's what I do, so I'm going to share it with you. I go from 709 to sRGB as my final color space transform. You should have this on before you edit, so I did that wrong. But now when I go to my little rocket ship here to export this clip, let's go H.264, add to render queue. Now when it renders, it actually looks the way it does in Resolve. Without that sRGB transform, it just doesn't, and I don't know why. But again, I'm no expert. All right, so that is the workflow. What I do love, and my number one pro for this, is that it can be everything from a total all-in-one sort of editor where you can do your exposure, your tint, your saturation, all your stuff, plus your film editing. That all-in-one package working on a single node in Resolve is awesome. I love that. But I especially love that you can layer it into a more complex node structure, node tree, and create even more refined adjustments and really customize this thing to the ends of the earth. I do, however, wish, and I would say one of my number one pieces of feedback, Dehancer, if you're listening, please give us the option to favorite things and save presets, because whilst you can save the preset off of the node, that's great. I don't love that there are like so many film options and I can't just go to my top 3. I basically only use 2 or 3 anyway, so I just want to be able to, at a quick glance, pull those out and have a favorited option for my film stocks. I also wish that when I applied Dehancer at the very start, there was no pre-populated film stock and film grain applied. I wish it just applied clean so I can build the look from the ground up. It's a small thing, but it actually it throws me every time. And if I were brand new to this, which I was 2 weeks ago, I was definitely like, what the heck just happened to my footage? It just applied all this stuff that I didn't want. So applying the thing and then being able to go in and build the look is kind of would be my preferred method. And this has nothing to do with Dehancer. This is a knock on YouTube, but the YouTube compression really does not play nicely with grain. I think I mentioned this, but just to get very specific on this, the grain will just look like noise and look dirty and awful. I learned this firsthand. It is very apparent. You will see it in my creative tips video. I'll link it below if you want to look at how that is. It doesn't look good, let me just tell you. So if you are going to export and want that grain built into your YouTube file without it looking like crap, the recommendation I got was export at your highest bitrate possible. Export 4K video at a minimum of 90,000 kilobytes, and you should hopefully be able to work around the YouTube compression issue. The final point on this and a con is going to be the price. This is a pricey bit of software to have. The Resolve, Premiere Pro, and Final Cut plugin options are going to run you $499 USD for a lifetime option, and then you can get like 1 year subscription for $299, 6 months for $199, and 3 months for $149. It's a lot. The upside is there is a free trial period for all of these options, so you can at least test it out and see if it works for you. I do really like it. I absolutely will continue to use it, so I'm glad I got the opportunity to try it. The photography plugin is cheaper, so if you are interested in me reviewing that, I'm happy to ask them for that license as well and give it a go. I have never used it myself. I have used the phone a little bit just because that is a nice sort of easy way to edit your photos on the go. And one thing I do like is just being really hacky and taking a photo on my phone and then just giving it a vibe in post. I use Snapseed, I use a bunch of other options, but this one definitely gives a bit more flexibility and customization. So I do love the product. It is expensive, and I recommend it all the same. So it's up to you as to whether it fits your needs, and if it's too much, you can also go with something like a LUT or something that's a little bit more one size fits all, but is more accessible and cheaper. If you have any questions or if you want me to try out their photo editor in Lightroom or Photoshop or whatever, just let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you in the next one. I'm excited about the next video. We'll see you then. Bye.
Mama, do you have glue?
Say that again?
Glue. Like glue.
Oh, glue. Do you want to have some scotch tape?
No, I need glue.
I don't have any glue per se. I think you're going to have to use scotch tape, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Let's get it. I have it.